Welcome back. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about an amazing crime that was perpetrated on Japanese convenience stores. In the early morning hours of a weekend, several ATMs were attacked with forged bank cards, and an amazing amount of money was stolen. Michael, you remember that conversation we had?
Yeah, but it seems I was completely wrong about almost everything.
Well, you thought that it might have been perps that were flown in. They came in from organized crime, and it looks like the police have captured a couple of people because of the security cameras, and their standing is that it's a homegrown crime. A lot of people that are, just delinquents, juvenile delinquents, or mafia.
Well, it turns out that the coordination seems to have been done domestically. What the origin of these forged bank cards remains a mystery, and it's possible that they were indeed manufactured in China, is one of the theories that's been put forth. But as for the persons who did the actual criminal act of going to the ATMs and taking money out in these convenience stores using these fake cards for a South African bank, this seems to have been recruited either by the internet or just by some kind of personal connections from amongst the basic criminal class here.
Right.
Small-time criminals, very unimpressive individuals largely, who were given, there's a job I have for you. You have to go to the convenience store with these cards, take out 100,000 yen, and here's the password for all of these cards. It's all the same.
Yep.
You don't have much to remember. Just keep going until you have used up all these cards in as many ATMs as you can.
What a wacky gig, because, everybody knows the security cameras are there, even though they did it early in the morning before the convenience stores are packed with many people.
Well, the thing is, it seems that a lot of them did what everybody does, or any reasonable criminal would do, wear a surgical mask, because wearing a surgical mask in Japan is not seen in some ways as looking suspicious, and people do it all the time. Some people do it, of course, for reasons of hay fever, but we're not in hay fever season. And others do it for anonymity. A lot of women entertainers and male entertainers, for example, wear surgical masks when they leave and walk in the street.
You do that too, don't you?
I never
You need
do
to.
that. I'm not that famous. Or infamous, or either. But anyway, they managed. Some of them managed to cover up their identities, but some of them didn't. And a few of these miscreants have been rounded up.
Right. Well, they have outside security cameras too, maybe unrelated to the convenience store. They see the cars come in, usually two cars. There was a chaser as well, and they can follow up on the license plates there. They can vector that, and they've pulled out a bunch of guys.
And they pulled out a lot of cash over a very short amount of time with this network.
3 hours.
It was very, 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 very coordinated. So you're probably right, and I was wrong, that that domestic organized crime was provided the organizational skills.
Well, you've got to imagine just having the on-the-ground experience of being able to walk in, look natural, have your friends outside, take you quickly to the next one. Apparently, each individual card could have made several transactions, and they went through several transactions, and they took the cash out and put the cash back in.
It was an interesting coordinated effort, and usually these perps were actually already involved in things like the ore scams, which are calling up old people and telling them to put money into ATMs.
I get them all the time.
Yeah, you have to be of a certain age, but it's not hard to get lists of older people. And this is a major crime, and fraud done by these individuals is a major subject. Every day on NHK at a certain hour of the afternoon, during their afternoon newscast, they have a special segment every single day on the latest kind of fraud, and it usually has something to do with these called in, hi, I'm your nephew, I'm in trouble, or there's been a special charge, or this is NHK, you haven't paid your bill for this, go to the ATM now, and here's the number that you... All these individuals that do this, preying upon the elderly, they were easily recruited for this preying upon the ATM system.
Well, it turns out that this isn't the only scam. In recent history, over the last 5 or 6 months, they've also had other scams Similarly with ATMs that have been successful, just not announced.
That seems to be the case, that they've been really quiet about how easy it is to steal money from a convenience store without even bringing in a weapon.
Right.
You just bring in a card. That is something that, of course, the ATM networks in Japan do not want to advertise too loudly. But when the losses pile up, and they have piled up, change has to come.
Well, change has come really quickly because the amount that can be withdrawn now has been significantly reduced, unless you have a card issued out of China.
There are all kinds of blocks that they've been putting in rather than reforming the entire system. But eventually, reform of the entire system has to happen, because when the Olympics happen in 2020, there are going to be all kinds of communications devices and people trying to use international banking systems here in Japan to withdraw cash. And unless the system is ready to handle that, there's going to be trouble.
You know, it's strange and somewhat counterintuitive, because the Japanese, you would think they are at the pinnacle of technology, but in terms of cybercrime, it seems that they're very, very weak.
It seems, well, there's that argument's always been made. It's really hard to tell, because Japanese banks and Japanese financial institutions have traditionally always been very quiet about embezzlement, about fraud, about ways that the banking system might actually be insecure. Much more so than I think than any other system in a free society elsewhere. They've really been able to put a lid on things, especially insider criminal activity, that would be unimaginable in other societies.
Well, particularly in Japanese society, you rarely see victimized crime. I mean, it happens, but most of the crime, the large number of crime that occurs here is white-collar crime. It's victimless crime, and that goes on at a huge level.
And it's an unmeasured scale. What we see on television and what we read about in the newspapers are these crimes involving. There are very few crimes that involve violence and involve persons who are actually engaging in criminal activity. But those are the ones that get on TV.
Right.
They have great video from the store video, whatever. But they're so comparatively rare.
Or guns.
That's right. All that gets blown way out of proportion as compared to, as you say, white-collar crime, which is probably a much bigger deal and only really gets promoted when a member of the bureaucracy is one of the persons who's fingered. Then, either that or a university professor, someone with some kind of supposed status and moral standards, who's found to have embezzled something, then that's promoted. But most of the time, embezzlement is buried. Right.
A touchy subject here in Japan, the presence and the activities of Yakuza. It's not talked about, but wouldn't you agree with me that, you know, if you don't understand the Yakuza portion of the Japanese economy and their place in Japanese society, you don't have a full grasp of how things work here.
You probably don't. In this case, in the case of this particular crime, somebody's going to have to pay from the Yakuza for doing this. This is humiliating the system. You can prey on the system, but only to a certain extent. In this case, this was a massive operation. You can suck a little bit off the top, but here they just took a vacuum cleaner and vacuumed up hundreds of millions of yen all over the country. Yeah. That's going to generate some backlash, and that's probably why we've actually seen arrests.
We're careful when we go to the ATM. You should be too. Please stay tuned.